He didn't walk into power with a handshake and a smile. There was no parade, no red carpet rolled out by world leaders, and definitely no big endorsements from powerful allies. Instead, he stepped in like a storm, wearing combat boots, carrying the hopes of his people, and sending a loud message to anyone who had gotten too comfortable profiting from Burkina Faso's land and silence. At just 34 years old, Captain Ibrahim Traoré became a bold new symbol in West Africa, a face of resistance that wasn't afraid to break the rules. In the first few months, he didn't follow the usual playbook, the one where African leaders nod along politely, allow foreign armies to set up camp and sign deals that leave their countries poorer than before. Traoré flipped the whole script. He told French troops to pack up. He tore up foreign contracts. He said flat out, Burkina Faso wouldn't be begging anyone for help anymore. Some people cheered. Others saw him as dangerous, too bold, too unpredictable. And that's when things got serious. Not just angry speeches or online trolls. Real danger. Real threats. Carefully planned and carried out with serious intent. Armed attacks. Explosions. Offers of money for betrayal. And it wasn't just enemies in the bush. These threats came from men in polished shoes, in military uniforms, even in fancy government buildings. When you take on the big powers of the world, it's not just bad press you're up against. You become a target. And Captain Traoré, he's faced more assassination attempts than you've probably got fingers to count. But this one stunned everyone. Before we continue, I want to ask you a question. Do you think Captain Traoré is the best president in Africa right now? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. Let's rewind to early 2023. The whole country was glued to their TVs, cheering for their favourite teams in the African Cup of Nations. Streets were calm, families were gathered, and it felt like nothing in the world could go wrong. It was one of those nights when people forgot their worries and just enjoyed the game. But not everyone was watching football. In another part of town, away from the noise, the laughter, and the glowing TV screens, a group of men were working on something very different. They weren't planning a party. They were planning to take down the president. Everything had been timed perfectly. They knew the crowd would be distracted. They guessed security would be a little more relaxed, and they were counting on things staying quiet and predictable. That's when they made their move. A strange device was quietly placed inside a house connected to Captain Ibrahim Traoré. It wasn't there to scare anyone. It was designed to blow up, fast and deadly, and to leave behind nothing but broken walls and unanswered questions. But they didn't stop there. Just in case the bomb didn't go off, or if something went wrong, they had a second plan. And this one was even colder. Early the next morning, while most people were still asleep or nursing a football hangover, the attackers were ready for phase 2. They had fake cars, real weapons, and men hiding along the route where Traoré's motorcade was supposed to pass. Their goal? Create confusion, split up the convoy, slow things down just enough to make the president vulnerable. And once that happened, they were ready to unleash everything they had. Guns, RPGs, no escape. Whoever planned this wasn't guessing. They had been watching the president for weeks. They knew his routine. When he left, when he came back, even when the guards switched shifts. It was the kind of detail you don't get without help from the inside. Or at least someone who knew when to keep quiet. But then out of nowhere, something strange happened. Help didn't come from the local police. It didn't come from Burkina Faso's army either. It came from another country, Russia. A message showed up, reportedly from Russian intelligence, and it didn't mess around. It included names, times, exact locations, and even what kinds of cars were being used in the ambush. And that message, it landed just hours before the bomb was set to go off. Suddenly everything changed. The device was found and safely shut down. The attackers scattered. The convoy stayed intact. And Traoré? He found out just how close he had come. Not to losing power, but to losing everything. It hit him like a cold wind. Someone, somewhere had already decided he had to go. Not later, not after debate, before his changes could even begin to grow. This wasn't some dramatic scene meant to make headlines or scare the public. No warning shots, no grand statement. It was supposed to be quiet, final, forgotten. But it wasn't. And when investigators started piecing things together, going over every move, every name, every plan, they found something chilling. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was just the start. If you are still watching this video, it means you love it. Why not take out a second and hit that like button? Have you done that? Let us move on. They couldn't blow him up during the football match. That plan went up in smoke, literally. But instead of backing off, his enemies just changed their game plan. If taking him out from the outside wasn't working, maybe the inside would do the trick. No bombs this time, no road ambushes or high-speed getaways. Just a quieter, sneakier weapon. Ambition. The kind that grows behind smiles and salutes. And it came from people who used to stand beside him, wearing the same uniform. September 2023 rolled in like any regular month. Meetings were held. Troops rotated in and out. Everything looked business as usual. But behind the scenes, something felt off. There were hushed conversations in empty offices, officers staying late for briefings that no one could confirm, phone calls that dropped the moment someone walked in the room. It wasn't just nerves, it was groundwork. And leading it were men who used to be at the top, key players from the last power shift. They weren't some fringe rebels hiding in the bush. These were insiders, trusted names, people who still had connections, favours owed, and quiet support from those bitter about Traoré's rise. They didn't want chaos, they wanted a clean swap. Remove the president, slide someone else in, keep the outside world calm, and sell the whole thing as a return to stability. Timing was everything. Traoré had just made some bold moves, pushing harder against colonial influence, announcing big changes to how gold and other resources were handled, and cozying up to regional powers that didn't always align with Western agendas. The ripples reached far, and some people didn't like what they saw. As intelligence teams dug deeper, things started pointing in a familiar direction. Paul-Henri Damiba. Yes, the same Damiba who Traoré had removed from power not long before. Turns out Damiba hadn't gone quiet. Word was he was still talking to key players inside the military. Some said he even had outside help, money and promises from folks who wanted the old playbook back. But this plan wasn't designed to explode. It was meant to slide into place like a chess piece, a quiet coup. Dress it up in patriotic language. Call it a correction. Get international approval while the dust is still settling. Only, it didn't work. Someone talked, names got out, arrests followed, and once again Traoré was still standing. But this time the lesson hit different. The real danger didn't always come from a masked gunman. Sometimes it sat right next to you in a meeting, smiled at you during lunch, wore the same badge, spoke of duty, and planned your downfall. And when bullets don't work and coups get caught, the next weapon isn't violence, it's money. Not coins and cash, but enough gold to buy silence, switch loyalties, and make people disappear. Because after 2 failed attempts, one loud, one silent, Traoré's enemies were still watching. And now, they were ready to try something else. This time the plan didn't involve tanks, shootouts, or power-hungry soldiers storming in with guns blazing. This one went straight for the heart of Traoré's world, his inner circle. Forget military uniforms and mercenaries. The man behind this new attempt didn't show up with weapons. He arrived quietly, flying in under the radar on a private jet. No press, no official welcome, no fanfare. What he brought wasn't violence, it was something far more tempting: cash. According to sources close to national security, the whole thing was done in whispers. No flashy meetings, no backroom political deals, just quiet conversations with the people who were always just a few steps away from Traoré, his personal guards. But these weren't just any bodyguards. These were the ones who stood right next to him during speeches, the ones who opened doors, cleared rooms, and knew every second of his schedule. They didn't need to sneak past any gates or fences, they were already in the room. And the offer they got, it was simple and terrifying. A mystery man, whose name is still locked up behind layers of government secrecy, reached out to one of the guards while they were off duty. No hints, no riddles, just a straight-up deal. $5 million in cash, no wires, no I owe us, no middlemen, just stacks of physical money ready to hand over. And that wasn't all. He brought ammo, specially made bullets, designed to break through body armour and make sure no one got a second chance. Why all the drama? Because Traoré didn't walk around in tanks or behind shields. He trusted the men around him. If even one of them flipped, there wouldn't be time to stop it. One wrong move, one raised arm, one shot, and it'd be over. The plan even had an escape route ready. Cars standing by, passports waiting, a new life in another country already set up. All that was missing, a traitor. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of going along with the deal, the guards did something no one saw coming. They called a meeting among themselves. Maybe it was fear, maybe loyalty, maybe something else entirely. They made a choice that didn't just protect one man, it may have kept an entire revolution alive. Instead of pocketing the money and vanishing, Traoré's guards handed it all over. Every dollar, every bullet, every single piece of the plan was placed right into the president's hands. People close to him later said he didn't look surprised, not even a little. He just nodded, like he'd been expecting it all along. Because by then it was clear, this wasn't just about enemies in far-off countries or angry leaders in exile. The danger had slipped inside. It was standing in his own hallways. It was trying to whisper through locked doors and shake hands with his most trusted men. What happened next didn't make headlines. No flashing lights, no breaking news. The man behind the bribe vanished quietly. Arrested in total silence, moved to a hidden location only a handful of people knew about. No one said where he was from. No mugshots. No courtroom drama. Nothing. But inside intelligence circles, the alarm bells were ringing. Who had the kind of money to drop $5 million on a secret hit job in one of the poorest nations on earth? Who had bullets that could slice through armour, the kind usually reserved for elite military units? And who had the guts to approach the personal guards of a president known to be one of the most heavily watched men in Africa? No one gave answers, but the silence left a message of its own. What really stood out wasn't who tried to buy them, it was the fact that no one took the deal. These men could have said yes, taken the money, flown out under fake names, and never looked back. But they didn't. They stayed, and in doing that, they didn't just stay loyal to Traoré, they pushed back against something bigger, the idea that everyone can be bought, that with the right price, even the closest allies will sell out. This wasn't some wild firefight or chaotic military standoff. It was a polished, near-perfect plan. No noise, no fuss. Just a clean hit, a funeral, and a new president who'd play ball with international powers. It was supposed to look like stability, like a sad accident. But it didn't work, and in its failure something terrifying came to light. His enemies weren't stumbling in the dark anymore. They were evolving, watching, testing new methods. They didn't need armies, just one man, one yes. And even though that yes never came, the message was already clear. The man with the money didn't have to succeed, not yet, because the offer alone proved something much more dangerous. This wasn't desperation, it was strategy. Pull back far enough, and what looked like scattered chaos starts to feel familiar, like pieces in a game, deliberately placed, carefully timed, and never left to chance. None of these attacks on Traoré came out of nowhere. They weren't random explosions or wild power grabs. They followed a rhythm. And when you line them up, each one with its date, method, and target, you start to see a pattern. Not one born out of anger or revenge, but of something far colder. Pressure, layered and relentless. The first thing that jumps out is the timing. Every single attempt happened right after Traoré pushed back, right after a move that disrupted someone else's grip on power. Not during quiet months, not between speeches, but right after decisions that shook the table. Take the plot during the football tournament. That wasn't just a random night of sports and national pride. It came right after Burkina Faso said it would rethink its military partnerships with France. Then there was the attempted coup. That one dropped right after Traoré announced he was rewriting mining laws, laws that would take profits out of foreign hands and put them into local ones. And the cash bribe, that offer didn't just show up out of thin air. It came just days after he revealed plans to build a state-run gold refinery. A refinery that would keep more of Burkina Faso's gold from being shipped out by global corporations. It's like every bold step toward independence triggered a counterstep, carefully plotted and surgically delivered. But timing is only the first clue. The second is how each attack came from a different angle. One tried to blow him up. One tried to replace him through a silent coup. One tried to flip the people closest to him with a briefcase full of money. No repeats, no sloppiness. Just a new method every time, testing for cracks in the system, in loyalty, in the rules, and maybe even in Traore himself. That's not the work of angry rebels with rifles. That's how trained minds operate. People who understand how institutions work. People who know if the front door's too strong, you try the back one. Or better yet, convince the guy with the keys to open it for you. Then comes the third piece, the stories, the whispers, the online posts. Every time an attack failed, the internet lit up with rumours. Claims that Traoré was losing control, that the military was divided, that his own people were turning on him. But those stories didn't come from reporters on the ground. They came from shady online accounts, many based in French-speaking countries, with no names, no faces, just steady drops of doubt. The goal wasn't just to harm his body, it was to wear down the idea of who he was, make people question him, make them uneasy, make allies nervous, not because of what he said, but because they weren't sure if he'd be around much longer to back it up. And that fear, that's the genius of the plan. It doesn't have to shoot a single bullet to do damage. It just has to make everyone around the president think twice. Backing him starts to feel risky. Working with him starts to feel uncertain. And before long, the structure around him begins to wobble. But while the pressure kept building, Traoré didn't fold. He didn't lock down the government. He didn't start pointing fingers. He didn't fill prisons with people he once trusted. Instead, he brought more voices into the room. He opened conversations with regional leaders. He let the public in on what was happening. He told the truth, not to scare people, but to prepare them. And maybe that's what rattled his enemies most. They expected fear. What they got was clarity. Because once you see how these attacks connect, how they mirror what's been done to other African leaders who tried to walk their own path, it stops feeling like a personal vendetta. It starts looking like a formula, one that's been used before, one that's being used again. And if there's a formula, that means there's someone writing it, someone with deep pockets, global access, and a whole lot to lose. Someone who doesn't want independence, they want obedience. So the real question becomes, how much longer will Captain Traoré stay alive? Traoré stay alive? Traoré stay alive?